今天的社会
As we all know, the society nowadays is showing obvious signs of a chaotic world.
呈现出来乱的程度
Such a degree of chaos cannot be found in the history of the East or the West.
没有这么乱。
Many people are worried. Will there be peace in our world?
这个世界还会有和平吗？
The answer is in our hands. We are the ones who created today's situations and environment. We have the power to make decisions. Do we want harmony or turmoil? Do we want to be equal to one another or to fight one another? If we encounter problems in relation to our personal issues, for example, our physical and mental health, we could refer to the governing principles of ancient China and find solutions in the section of character building.
找修身
For issues relating to family issues, you can also consult this compilation and find solutions. For issues relating to the governance of a country or a small village, a town or a county, you can also seek guidance in this compilation. For example, if a head of a town facing difficult matters consults this compilation, he or she definitely will find solutions in it. The governing principles of ancient China can save China and even save the whole world. Among the dynasties in China's history, the Tang dynasty, 618 to 907 CE, is worthy of great praise. The great governance of the Zhenguan era was established by Emperor Taizong, 598 to 649 CE. How did Emperor Taizong achieve so much? He relied on a compilation titled The Governing Principles of Ancient China. Emperor Taizong ascended to the throne at the age of 27. At the time, he was very young and inexperienced in the affairs of governing a country. Before becoming the emperor, he was a general who fought well in the battles. He was exceptionally good at archery. The establishment of the Tang dynasty relied on his success in the battles. His father, the founder of the Tang dynasty, admitted that without his son, he could not have established a new reign. Emperor Taizong, however, did not know how to run his country properly at that time, not even a province or a county. But he was very smart. He summoned his ministers, like Wei Jin, who were learned and virtuous. He instructed them to form a team to compile books for him on governance. He only wanted to read the essence because he did not have time to read all the numerous examples of good governance. That team became his think tank and provided him with various strategies. Then he made the final decision. He was very good at this. Then the team started working on the compilation. They chose from the texts recording the speech of sages and wise people from the 3 sovereigns and the 5 emperors, 2852 to 2070 BCE, up to the Tang dynasty. They categorized the texts into 4 major themes: cultivating oneself, bringing harmony to a family, governing a country, and bringing peace to the world. The final compilation contained texts from nearly 70 classics covering 4 focal points. The first one is self-cultivation, how to maintain a strong body and a healthy mind. Without this foundation, nothing could be achieved. This is the first priority. Imagine what could be accomplished by a person who was ill every day. The second focal point was on bringing harmony to a family, how to run a good family where all family members, young and old, were happy. That is, to carry out the moral principles of the 5 harmonious relationships and the 5 constant virtues in the family. Once a family is harmonious, one applies and extends the principles to govern the country. By applying the principles of running a harmonious family, one can govern a country. By applying the principles of governing a country, one can bring peace to the world. What is bringing peace to the world? People in this world are treated equally and live harmoniously like one family. These are the 4 focal points of the governing principles of ancient China. Emperor Taizong was very happy to have the compilation. Reading the texts every day, he was filled with joy. He used the governing principles of ancient China to guide his behaviour. He also required his ministers and officials to study the compilation.
The governing principles of ancient China laid the foundation for prosperity in China for the next 100 years. When we examine this prosperous great governance of Zhen Guan era, we can appreciate 3 characteristics. First, there was great development in agriculture. Food was in abundance in the 6th and 7th year of the Zhen Guan era. The country experienced great weather and successful harvests. When people travelled, they didn't need to bring dried food with them. That they could simply buy food along the way was not previously observed in previous dynasties. When travellers entered villages, they would be treated to abundant food. When they departed, they would even be offered food for the next leg of their journey. In the 8th and 9th years, as well as 13th and 16th years of the era, the harvests were also successful. As a result, one can imagine the prosperity of this time. Second, there was social order. In the 4th year of the Zhen Guan era, around 630, in the whole country, only 29 people were sentenced to death. Third, the Zhen Guan era was the only time in Chinese history that saw little to no corruption. This could be seen as perhaps the greatest political achievement during the time of Emperor Taizong's rule. He ruled by example and advocated frugality. As a result, officials across the country performed their duties with little or no abuse of power, corruption and misconduct. As the emperor held himself to high moral standards, officials followed suit, which had a significant positive effect on the government as a whole. The governing principles of ancient China served as a resource for Emperor Taizong on how the methods of the sages were used to govern a country. He implemented them with good effect, resulting in swift changes.
The governing principles of ancient China was Emperor Taizong's treasure for governing the country. Whenever Emperor Taizong encountered problems, he would consult this compilation to find answers and seek inspiration. The glory of the Tang dynasty was a result of the governing principles of ancient China. The set of books has gone through the test of time. The Tang dynasty enjoyed glory for over 300 years. This compilation is now one of the courses in the Party School of Central Committee of the CPC in China. China's president, like Emperor Taizong of the Tang dynasty, has taken the lead and required all the national political personnel to diligently study this compilation. This will bring China to the glory like that of the Tang dynasty, which is wonderful. This is the brief story of the governing principles of ancient China.
Oui, j'ai lu le livre des principes de gouvernance de la Chine ancienne. À mon avis, c'est un livre qui mérite d'être lu par tous les dirigeants du monde. J'en ai partagé aussi avec les gouvernants de mon pays. Et j'en ai eu des échos très positifs concernant ce livre par les gens qui l'ont lu. Moi-même, je crois que c'est un livre qui peut changer la face du monde. Ce livre véhicule des sagesses universelles. Mais tout ce qu'il y a là-dedans, c'est vraiment des principes de vie de l'humanité, de l'homme. Les principes qui sont inscrits là-dedans, dans ce livre, concernent l'individu, concernent les relations qui devraient se faire entre les membres de la famille, comment les membres de la famille doivent se traiter mutuellement. Les principes concernent la communauté, la gouvernance du pays. Mais dans tout ça, on trouve des sagesses universelles. Après avoir lu ce livre, on s'y réfère tout le temps, même dans la vie quotidienne. Quand j'interagis avec mes enfants, quand il y a un peu de difficulté, dans ce livre, il y a la solution. Quand dans le travail, au travail, quand il y a quelques tensions, parce qu'il y a beaucoup de pression, parce qu'il y a beaucoup de choses à faire, quand il y a un peu de tension entre les membres d'un groupe, dans ce livre, il y a la solution pour dénouer tous ces problèmes. Mais, vous m'avez demandé les cotations des passages qui me paraissent essentiels. J'en ai choisi trois passages. Alors, je vais lire. Hein. Dans la page 28, Liu Tao, dans le rouleau 31, disait: si un dirigeant n'est pas vertueux, il risque de mettre sa nation en danger et de créer le chaos chez ses sujets. Un dirigeant vertueux amène la stabilité dans sa nation et l'ordre chez ses sujets. Le destin d'une nation dépend donc en premier lieu des capacités et de la sagesse de son dirigeant et non de la volonté divine. Tous les problèmes qui se passent dans ce monde, la pauvreté, les problèmes environnementaux, la maladie, tout ça ont des liens avec la mauvaise gouvernance. Et ce livre, les principes de gouvernance de la Chine ancienne, donne des indications claires concernant ce qu'il faut faire ce qu'il ne faut pas faire pour avoir un pays en paix, stable. Actuellement, on est en phase, en période préélectorale à Madagascar. Nous avons pas mal de candidats. Nous avons 36 candidats à l'élection présidentielle. Et je vais envoyer ces émissions à tous ces candidats pour qu'ils sachent ces sagesses anciennes, ces principes de gouvernance de la Chine ancienne qui pourraient aussi être utilisés pour gérer un pays comme Madagascar. Quand on gère un pays, quand on est face à de différents problèmes, à des urgences extraordinaires, des fois, les dirigeants ont tendance à faire des choses à la va-vite, trop vite. Et bien sûr, ils font des erreurs. J'ai personnellement discuté avec quelques dirigeants qui m'ont demandé mon avis. Je leur ai dit, voilà, j'ai 2 textes à vous lire, à vous dire, et vous prenez la conclusion que vous pouvez prendre. Et je leur ai donné ces 2 textes. Dans ce livre, Les principes de gouvernance de la Chine ancienne, en page 14 et page 15. Confucius disait, faire une faute, mais ne pas la corriger, voilà la véritable erreur. Donc, si le dirigeant est conscient qu'il a fait une faute, il faut qu'il corrige. Sinon, c'est là vraiment qu'il fait l'erreur. Le deuxième texte que je leur ai donné, c'était la suite, c'est Zigong disait « Les erreurs d'un homme de bien sont comme les éclipses de soleil et de lune. Lorsqu'il faute, tout le monde voit ses défauts. En se rectifiant, la lumière revient comme après l'éclipse et tous le regardent avec respect. » C'est très important pour le dirigeant alors de connaître ses fautes, avoir l'humilité de les rectifier. Sinon, ils n'auront plus le respect de la population et il ne pourra plus gouverner cette population. Après avoir discuté avec ces quelques dirigeants, le gouvernement a pris à Madagascar une décision. Je ne dis pas que c'était grâce parce que je leur ai dit ces 2 textes, mais je suis sûr que ça les a influencés dans leur décision. Ils ont décidé de ne pas faire le forcing sur un texte de loi qui ont été votés à ce moment-là. Ils ont décidé de faire marche arrière et de changer de politique, changer de structure de gouvernement, changer de gouvernement pour avoir la stabilité. Et grâce à ce mouvement de rectification des fautes, le pays, pour le moment, est stable, en paix, et on peut espérer pouvoir faire les élections d'ici 3 mois. Donc, c'est un exemple très concret comment moi personnellement j'ai utilisé ce livre qui est mon oreiller pratiquement parce que je lis ce livre avant de dormir et des fois quand je me réveille.
I will say that they've been missing something. Missing a great source of wealth, of information. They've been missing a collection that could either reinforce their thinking or also show them new vistas of thinking. Because you'd find sometimes you're getting advice, sometimes you're getting a kind of direction or some kind of forecast. If you do this, this may be the consequences to your people or to yourself. And sometimes, you know, during a working day or I'm reflecting on something, or writing something, I look and say, okay, these governing principles must have said something about this. So it's like I use it as a reference, like a backing, to say, you see, this thing that we're thinking, a long time ago, some people have thought it out, and it's been put in this book. So it's to kind of support. So it's like having an encyclopedia somewhere, but this is an encyclopedia that is, it's spiritual, but not in the religious sense. It gives you information, it gives you advice that you cannot just get anywhere. I remembered one time with my minister, my present Minister of Education, and really I read quite a lot of scripts for him. But if you take, for instance, page 28, these are the virtues, you know, how a leader who is not virtuous will bring danger to the nation and chaos to his people. I remembered, you know, citing this example. We were just discussing generally about politics in my country. And then we were talking about the different political parties, the challenges of governance, and so on and so forth. And when we talked, then I said to him, look, there is this book that seems to have advice to the leader, how you can lead, how you can be a better leader to your people, and what happens to countries when they have bad leaders or people that are not supposed to be chosen are chosen as ministers. You know, what happens to that society, what happens to that nation. So we're talking like that, and then I took the book, and really I think we went through many of the scripts on leadership with him. And at the end of the day, I gave him a copy of the book. You know, it's only that not everybody has, you know, access, you know, to this kind of information. That's just coming, you know, not from any particular religious perspective. And for me, that's why I feel comfortable reading this. I feel comfortable giving it out to people. It's not that I'm giving anyone a religious text. These are very wise sayings and very wise scripts that will guide everyone, from the young person to the very old person. Yeah. Those who bring benefits to the world will also bring benefits to them. For those who bring harm to the world will also bring harm to them. A benevolent ruler will attract the populace to follow him because he is good at bringing benefits to the world. So basically, for me, when you think of the world, you start with the family, the community, you know, because you will not just all at once bring benefit to the whole world. So it means you have to be good, you have to be kind, you have to be caring, you have to be sensitive, first to the family and then to your community. But if you are not, in the reverse, you know, it's like whatever are your bad deeds, you will reap the bad deeds. Because then, if you are not good, you are not kind, and this is to the family, to the community, the family will also, in a way, reject you and leave you to your fate. So this, for me, is very instructive. But it also goes on, ends with the benevolent ruler. The ruler that loves his people, that cares for his people. So if the ruler cares for his people, he's not wicked, he's always thinking of things in their best interest, the people will follow him. You know? Otherwise, there is a saying that if you think you're a good ruler or a leader, once in a while look back and see whether anybody is following you. Because if you're not a good ruler, most probably very few or nobody will be following you genuinely. Looking at the individuals in history who have made contributions to the society, it is evident that they all had accumulated outstanding and remarkable stories through their endurance against innumerable physical strains and hardship. As well, they were assiduously thoughtful. They never let their studies go to waste, and they never changed their ideals despite poverty. Now here, for me, it reminds me of some of the great leaders we had in politics in Nigerian history. People who contributed a lot, went through a lot of suffering, because maybe their manifesto was people-oriented. We had one of such great leaders, he's late, one Aminu Kano. His own manifesto was always people-oriented, you know. So he always, suffered for the people in the hand of opposition governments and so on and so forth. So this text actually reminds me of him, and then other people in other societies. You find that you take somebody like Nelson Mandela, you know, if we're looking at the African level, look at all his travails, look at all his sufferings, all for the freedom of the people, because you see, he said they have accumulated outstanding and remarkable stories through their endurance against innumerable physical strains and hardships, you know. And at the end of the day, they were just doing it for the people, not to gain anything for themselves. So for me, this is a very important scroll in African listening and my own personal life. Yeah.
These books actually covers almost all the aspects and parameters of the good governance. This is the thing, actually. It's not only one thing. It covers everything. It talks about morality. It talks about ethics. It talks about corruption. It talks about strategy. So it covers absolutely everything, and from different point of view. It's not only technical administration issues. Yes, there are technical administration issues, but there are more psychological things, educational things. The profile of the diplomats, of the governing persons. So he offered me several books. Between these books, there was the books about the principles of governance, principles of ancient China. So at the beginning, I said, these principles should be expired nowadays. Ancient China goes back 2,000 years ago, and I don't know if it is really relevant. But in any case, I'll have a look. So I read some paragraphs, and I was really impressed, because it appeared to me that it is still relevant nowadays. And more I read in it, I found that it is not only relevant, but it is in advance also in some articles for our time. Par exemple, si on veut voir comment c'est encore valable de nos jours et disons en avance par rapport à son temps et peut-être de notre temps, il y a ce passage. Voilà, il est là. Donc, ici il dit, afin de cultiver sa vertu, un homme devrait d'abord montrer l'exemple auprès de sa femme en la traitant toujours avec respect. Donc ici, on parle du respect de la femme, et c'est quelque chose qui est encore d'actualité dans beaucoup de sociétés de nos jours. Puis, en s'érigeant en modèle auprès de ses frères et sœurs avant de prétendre pouvoir gouverner un pays. Donc ici, on demande au gouverneur de donner l'exemple du respect de la femme et de l'égalité de l'homme et de la femme. Et ça, vous savez que l'égalité des genres est une priorité de l'UNESCO. Si on veut, en fait, il y a beaucoup d'exemples, on va peut-être passer beaucoup de temps, mais je ne vais pas prendre tous les exemples. Je vais prendre peut-être un autre exemple qui est important parce que c'est encore quelque chose qui nous manque. Voilà. Ça, pour moi, c'est un article qui parle du courage, de la franchise et de la sincérité d'un dirigeant pour le bien de son pays. Il dit, les ministres fidèles n'hésiteront pas à braver la mort en osant critiquer franchement le souverain. Seule une critique sincère peut exposer la vérité. La franchise est donc ce qu'un dirigeant éclairé souhaite, et c'est pourquoi ces loyaux sujets n'hésitent pas à risquer leur vie en s'exprimant avec sincérité. Bien sûr, ici, il parle aussi du profil psychologique du dirigeant. Le dirigeant intelligent doit accepter les critiques. Et seuls les dirigeants qui ne sont pas intelligents, qui n'acceptent pas. Il y a beaucoup d'autres exemples aussi. Il y a des exemples qui correspondent un petit peu à la politique d'aujourd'hui et au clivage politique gauche-droite. Voilà. Tous prétendent connaître des méthodes de gouvernance, mais leur mise en pratique diffère. Et ça, c'est le problème politique. Gauche et droite, chacun prétend avoir la bonne méthode, la meilleure méthode. Certains estiment qu'il importe de rectifier les erreurs d'autrui. D'autres pensent d'abord à corriger leurs propres fautes. Rectifier ces erreurs, c'est aborder le problème à sa source, tandis que rectifier celle des autres, c'est s'attaquer à ses conséquences. Un gentilhomme attaque un problème à la source et peut ainsi cultiver sa vertu, se réaliser et éviter les conflits. Un homme de peu s'attaque aux conséquences d'un problème, se fait des ennemis et ne réalise rien. Donc ça, c'est effectivement ça s'adapte aussi au clivage politique. Les uns n'ont pas quelque chose à proposer de concret et ne regardent pas leurs erreurs, mais ils se satisfont de critiquer les autres et dire voilà, c'est les erreurs des autres, toujours c'est la faute aux autres, et on ne regarde pas nos propres erreurs. Et si vous regardez sur les scènes politiques en Europe ou ailleurs, vous trouvez la même chose encore de nos jours. Bon, simplement pour finir, je pense qu'il y a un article qui résume à peu près l'ensemble de l'esprit de ces principes. Et c'est très simple et c'est très court. En fait, voilà, il dit, lorsque la morale, la vertu, le code d'éthique, la bienveillance et la droiture sont observés, le monde emprunte la véritable voie, en fait la véritable bonne voie. Donc c'est résumé. La bonne voie peut être atteinte à travers ces principes qui respectent la morale, la vertu, l'éthique, la bienveillance et la droiture. Et en réalité, tous les autres principes sont basés sur ou bien la morale, ou vertu, ou bienveillance, ou droiture, ou justice, ou égalité, etc. Donc, je pense sincèrement que quand on lit, même au hasard des fois, on n'est pas obligé de le lire dans l'ordre. On peut lire au hasard et on trouve toujours que c'est approprié et c'est pertinent encore aujourd'hui et probablement demain. À mon avis, ces principes, ce sont des principes qui rapprochent l'homme de son état d'humain, de l'humanité. Et surtout, ça s'adresse aux gouvernants et malheureusement, c'est les gouvernants de nos jours à travers le monde qui ont besoin de respecter ces principes. The most important thing to keep in mind is that these principles are still relevant nowadays and they are based on the ideal principles of human beings, which is equality, justice, morality, ethics, and so on. So the most important thing to keep in mind the relevance of these principles. This is the first thing. Second thing, these principles could apply for any directing organ or person, and it is available not only for diplomats or for governing people, but for anybody who is involved in any administration, and also actually it could be used by any citizen just for the principles themselves, since the principles, as I mentioned, are still relevant and are in advance. So this book could be read by anybody, and actually there are different levels of understanding also of these principles. But whatever the level of understanding that you have, it will be also always benefit for the person who reads it.
Where did the wisdom of the Chinese come from? This wisdom is not only owned by Chinese. The Buddha said it well when he explained that wisdom comes from the revelation of true minds. People living on this planet Earth are not functioning from their true minds. On the contrary, they are using their false minds. What is the difference between the true mind and the false mind? The true mind is a pure mind, the original mind that everyone has, including you and me. The mind that does not give rise to a single wandering thought is a true mind. We see things with our eyes and we hear sounds with our ears. Before we hear a sound, at the moment a sound arises, or after a sound has been heard, if our mind does not give rise to a single wandering thought, the mind is a true mind. Alternatively, under the above-mentioned circumstances, if our minds become affected, for example, with the emotions of preference, anger, sadness, admiration, love, disgust and desire, then our mind will not be functioning as a true mind, but as a false mind. The false mind has preference and hatred, while the true mind does not. A true mind is like that of a newborn infant, for its mind is true. A baby does not know about preference or desire, does not have a heart of possession. An infant has no such ideas, for its mind is true. When we observe carefully, we can quite easily find good examples. I think it was in 2004 that I attended a UNESCO conference in Yokohama, Japan. When I was taking a walk in the morning, I saw a young woman pushing a pram with her newborn baby. The baby was born less than 100 days old. Suddenly realizing something, I asked the people around me to observe the mother and her baby. The baby was looking at the mother. No one had taught this less than 3-month-old baby to love his mother, yet anyone could see there was the true love reflected in his eyes. No one had taught the baby. He just acted naturally. I told the people around me that what babies under 100 days old reveal is the true nature that is never changing and permanent. You will find the same if you all observe carefully. Hence, the Buddha said that the heart of a person is true and genuine in nature. The ancient Chinese likewise said that people at birth are naturally good.
We have to balance out our ways on this planet, and the only way to balance out our ways on this planet is by means of learning, by means of creating a humanistic worldwide culture which is characterized by a great diversity and by also the maintenance of what has been developed over thousands of years. Many people do not think about this, the importance of the influence of China during the 17th and 18th century on the German civilization. So a lot of philosophers have studied Confucian lore at that time, and also in terms of economy, the Jesuits in China, they provided the philosophers in Europe with writings about Wu-wei economy, for example, and they for example, the French philosopher François Quesnay, they studied these principles in economy and have influenced the modern system in Europe, the modern economic system, via this influence of Chinese thought. And later on, Karl Marx studied François Quesnay and other economists and had an influence on China again. So we see that there are always these, this is maybe a good example for exchange and also for the mutuality of learning which takes place in history. If we are able to create such a new kind of system where we venerate all the practices, all the cultural treasuries that all the civilizations past and present have developed, all the human beings around the world for thousands of years have created systems, methods, ways of beauty. If we venerate that, if we appreciate that, if we are able to absorb that, this will also boost our economies. This will provide us with completely new perspectives, a new form of creativity. It will make mankind a very rich, it will provide mankind with a very rich life not just in terms of economy, which is, so to speak, also one important aspect, but also in terms of creativity, in terms of well-being, and last not least in terms of happiness. Because only by means of culture we will be able to create societies which are based on the principle of happiness and which are based on the principle of mutual learning. And only these kind of forms, societies, will be able to exist on a long-term manner, and they will naturally, so to speak, also practice eco-friendly ways of life, because they are not based on consumerism, but they will be based on learning and culture and self-refinement in a society as a group phenomenon, self-refinement, culture cultivation from generation to generation as a binding practice which keeps the societies together, and also individual self-cultivation which provides us with a happy life, with a life of fulfillment, with a life which is lived in a constant state of flow. And I think we can learn a lot from the past, but we also have to direct our attention towards the future in this regard, and we have to try to include the modern technologies and at the same time the new thoughts about the eco-civilization and eco-friendly ways. We have to balance out our ways on this planet, and the only way to balance out our ways on this planet is by means of learning, by means of creating a humanistic worldwide culture which is characterized by a great diversity and by also the maintenance of what has been developed over thousands of years, and by the veneration of these different traits and different branches of the tree of mankind.
In 2015, after I attended another peace conference at UNESCO, I went to London. I had heard that Chinese had become the popular subject in primary school, secondary schools, and universities. I was surprised to hear that. That's why I wanted to go and have a look with my own eyes. I didn't know how, but the British government found out about my trip, and I was invited to go to the House of Lords, where there was a warm reception. I talked to members of the House and asked the reason why Chinese was prescribed as a subject in schools. They were very frank with me. They said, the 19th century was the century of the British, the 20th century, the Americans, and the 21st century is the century of the Chinese. If we don't learn Chinese, the Chinese language, we'd be disadvantaged. That's why they are taking this action. Also in London, I met a person out of great affinity. He was Professor Medwyn Hughes, Vice-Chancellor of the University of Wales Trinity St David. Professor Hughes later arranged for me to meet Prince Charles, and we met several times. At the end, Professor Hughes thought of a way. He proposed to have an Academy of Sinology to train people for the purpose of passing down the heritage. That was the beginning of the Academy of Sinology at the University of Wales Trinity St David. This year is the third enrolment at the Academy. The governing principles of ancient China is one of the subjects there. As said before, the sole purpose of the Academy of Sinology is to train a group of young people to acquire the ability to read the governing principles of ancient China. If they possess this ability, I will be contented. If they are able to read it, study it diligently, and then reflect it on their own practice of self-cultivation, managing their family, governing their countries, and bringing peace to the world, our education will have been a success.